Good afternoon and Merry Christmas Eve, everyone. So I have this calling to be a 20-year, full-time, 16-hour per day, Monday through Sunday, supermodel, talent, and producer. God made me the most successful supermodel for a 7-year period before it was replaced by a brothel contract with minimum wage workers who were gang raped with a brothel in order to work minimum wage and have people drugged in order to have them gang raped in order to work minimum wage and live at the club with doctors who have school bloggers who live with brothels and then marry the occult at Disneyland the next day as kidnappers for Church of Abortion. And they die as satanic producers since the year 2000. And so it's this really rare top percentage of the only real supermodels for a 7-year period. And it's international, where they're never compared to a downgrade for less than an agency rate. So all over the world, the most successful resume supermodels were signed across the board. And it's through booking commercials and rejecting Satanism for being a pop star in order to be signed with commercials and book the talent jobs. And it's international. They're never compared to anyone else's calling. So the whole economy of the top percentage investors didn't pay that top percentage, and so they lost their money. And this is the whole economy. So it switched after 7 years to being this contract with viral employees who shoot the campaign. It's like American Apparel, where they just pick random employees to be prostitutes, to live with a brothel, to shoot the campaign. But it's the investor, and it's healthcare, and they're doctors. So they have these porn stars who are Uber drivers or minimum wage workers, any job you can think of, because when their money's stolen, they lose their money too. Small business owners, anything. Psychiatric nurses to go to more school to become slave trade doctors. So it's slave trade no matter how much money you have if you worship in a cult. So it's money worshiping. They caused that to happen. So after 7 years, it's this really rare thing to be the highest paid supermodel who's also the highest paid commercial talent, to book the spots on TV and be on camera every day rejecting less successful production companies who are Jewish producers and also people who just have that blessing to have a very small production company. So they reject the less than an agency rate. They drive to Bel Air and it costs the $8,000 a year of gas. And so my dad paid for 3 cars in 20 years, and he paid for an apartment in New York for 6 months that costed $3,000 a month. And it was just when I needed it. So I had just enough to survive, to follow God. But his oil money was stolen. And so I was able to have an apartment for 6 months in Santa Monica with Brittany Watts, who ended up being someone who's a leader in the government. And so she was a hotel manager at Lowe's Hotel. But she went to the restaurants and the clients did prescribe drugs for partying. And it's this thing that happened with hotel management and with the managers in retail. So I rejected Cannes to be a slave trade brand and rejected managers internationally who do slave trade to be a retail manager, along with hotel managers, along with the models who are slave trade brand owners since the year 2000. So they reject Coca-Cola and all these viral productions since the year 2000. But it's really our pastor who hosted the LGBT rights for minimum wage to be a satanic minimum wage worker living with a brothel. And it was the pastor in Cabo Beach. And so he hosted this with this girl, Grace, who hosted this party, who grew up with the church. And it was Monday through Sunday to party on drugs, and it was through counseling. So no matter what they do, they ran out of money. And some of the parents didn't pay it since the year 2000. So they forced counseling, and they had them human trafficked in order to die or become someone who's a satanic worshiper for minimum wage, living with brothels. So 2007, I had this really rare thing. And I was able to be the highest paid commercial actress by sticking to an agency rate to book the spots on TV once a year with a speaking line to a celebrity. So I knew from God I was meant to do it without it being corrupt, because there are no sales otherwise. And so they're the godly ambassadors, these true supermodels, this first 7-year period, signed with print, commercials, theatrical, runway, and then in-store blogging. So it was every single day until 2012, Monday through Sunday, city to suburbia. I worked for companies like Vans and White Seal and Charlotte Russe, and the surfer brands like PacSun out of Orange County. And it's also in San Diego. But it was replaced out of every city in suburbia for a brothel for minimum wage since the year 2007, but really since the year 2000. And so the small businesses became viral. And at the small business fairs, it's a huge majority of them underneath slave ship brands my age. And so I rejected Can for being a satanic manager in retail, but it's also a soap star who made $1 million a year, and the theatrical actresses who work minimum wage, living with brothels, city to suburbia. And so that's how God blessed me to be the one person to get booked each year with these spots on TV with a speaking line to a celebrity, and have me audition every single day and reject less than an agency rate when the producers want to go camping. And so that's how I had the best resort blogging with the LA Fashion Week every year for 20 years. So I had a runway division, and it was from 2007 to 2012, and it was a referral. So all the agencies are a referral through each other, and they all know each other. It's just that there's nothing they can do. They can only book that one runway show with the hand-picked ones the clients pick out of all agencies based off their resume. So it's the ones who stick to an agency rate the whole time for 20 years who are able to have the highest paid company for co-producing for blogging. It's just that they're paying, and they pay through catalogs each month to be signed with the print division, to have a magazine with a celebrity editorial each weekend for 20 years in order to book the runway shows once a year for 20 years, and in order to book the spots on TV as the hot girl role who has a direct booking with A-list productions to get better. But before being the A-list actress, they earned that $80,000 per job for 20 years. And so it's this job internationally where there are 20-year supermodels, talent, and producers who worked every day for 12 years. And it's out of LA through Ford, and the ones I worked with through Ford, who are 20-year supermodels. And it's this group who were in New York and in Miami and out of LA, but it's international. So a lot of them would go back to their hometown the year 2007, but they're not compared to a minimum wage worker anywhere. They're never compared to anything else. And so all these viral celebrities were human trafficked homeless by the mental asylum LGBT rights healthcare, and it's through their families and their network, even their husbands. And it caused for them to be human trafficked, and a lot of them died that way, and they became Satan worshipers, and they died that way. And so it's really important to never compare any of the real top percentage to any of the slave trade, because their calling is right with God to never have an image before God for 20 years, and they would have the $100,000 a year for 40 years. So the biggest problem is that it makes it so that small business owners owe the $1K per $5K as they go for the $2K per $10K. And they're this rare top percentage who never partied on drugs Monday through Sunday with the doctors and the managers everywhere. They actually chose to work 100% of the time without weekends off. And so I was signed with print, commercials, theatrical, runway, and in-store blogging with celebrity in-store presentations up until 2012. And that's how I met Brittany Murphy and Keanu Reeves' mom. And they have this celebrity network internationally where they show up where they are because they know that it's their calling 100% of the time for 20 years. When it's following God, which made it so that they're able to have this small business that requires the $10,000 a year for 20 years on a budget, where most of them don't have a car and they commute and take the train, and it's replaced now for all major clients. So it's just that they would have to be paid for their production company for life since the year 2007, but really as they go since the year 2000. And so it's something where they're not compared to anybody else, and they're not ever blamed for the persecution from the devil. So they're the top percentage, and they needed to have charities. And it happened with all churches worshiping the other gods because the celebrities paid donations and it never paid them. So it recruited human trafficking victims for LGBT rights, minimum wage, Satanists in Cambodia. So the Kardashians went to Cambodia, and people went on vacation without having the money in the bank. And everyone would have the 5K for middle class. But in Compton, they would have it through charities. And people didn't pay this top percentage in Compton, but they didn't pay it through me, through Ford, because they were able to have more money through Ford to have the $10,000 a year for that 7-year period. And it's the difference between living or dying. There was this IMTA where they accepted people's $10,000 a year, and they couldn't get them a paid job outside of an agency contract. And so it's just that it's through Ford that they were able to have this $250,000 contract I won, and I'm owed the $1.4 million for that 4-year period. So God bless Ford models, where all these Ford models would get the $1.4 million from 2001 to 2004, and they would get the $250,000 if they won for the world, and the ones who won for their country would be paid internationally, and it would be where they're all paid the $80,000 per job. So after 2007, talent got $1 million a year scouted for print, commercials, theatrical, and for all of it, for having your own brand. So they earned their own anti-slave trade brand since 2007. It's the $1 million a year for all of it. So some of the very best ones like me, who are the ones who shot campaigns, commercials, theatrical, runway, celebrity in-store presentations, and then the blogging from 2012 to 2020 with a celebrity magazine co-producing every weekend, separate from being exploited and rejecting the slave trade, party promoter, and prostitution slave trade clients 5 days a week with a weekend magazine each weekend, and with this full-time schedule devoted to their business so that they can have the $8,000 a year in gas. Those ones who did it 100% of the time without ever partying on drugs for promotion, without ever allowing exploitation from any slave trade healthcare or any slave trade employees who had nothing to do with the slave trade and who focused on God and gave God their whole career for 20 years. Those ones did earn the $150,000,075 for blogging, for their own highest paid brand. So they're the ones who could have a $500 million movie and be the lead talent and be the lead producer. So they're Christian producers who work to the most amount of A-list business. And they have that network for everyone. But no one has an investor without them. Merry Christmas.